Welcome to the Pat Mayo Experience, Week 14 DraftKings picks and preview for the main slate, the Millionaire Maker slate on Sunday. Coming up later in the week, all of these spread previews and pick 'em with Jeff Feinberg and Tim Andacus back from Miami. And then on Friday, the DraftKings ownership show and injury report with Ben Raza, so be on the lookout for that. You can go back and check out the rankings debate from Tuesday as well with Jake Seaway. And do not forget, never forget, to give the episode a like. Always helps. Joining me on the line, because it is Latino American Heritage Week, it is El Siege. How are you?
Good, Pat. How are you?
Good. Is Kaltenbach a traditional El Salvadorian name?
It is not.
Oh.
So,
German, maybe?
Since when do I play the chalk? Yeah. German. It's more like it, yeah.
Siege, you can find almost every single day up on rotogrinders.com, and he is now the first 4 or 5 time returning guest on the show this year. 4 times?
I think it's 4. Yeah.
One more and you're going to be Booker T and you're going to be good to go.
Well, that decision lies in your hands and your hands alone, sir.
This is true. We're running out of weeks, though. So maybe a week 17, but you'll probably be on holidays because you're a real big shot. Now that your mom came second and won all the money, you don't need to work over the holidays.
That's not true. I'll be around.
Yes, so will I. All right, let's get right into the slate. Running backs to start off with, and I'm not going to the top first because the big news so far right now is that the pricing came out on Monday. The Monday Nighter happened. Joe Mixon suffered a concussion. He has yet to return to practice. He skipped practice on Wednesday. Obviously, we're recording this on a Wednesday, so this is what we're going with. Gio Bernard is $3,100. Is there any way that you can get out of using 100% Gio Bernard here?
I mean, he has an injury past of his own.
He's not hurt right now.
Right, but try to give him a full workload. You asked me, is there any way, Pat? Any way. I tried to present a alternative to not make you go 100, maybe 99 or 98.
I feel like this is the first time all season that this has kind of happened, that we have a clear-cut, volume-based running back who also works in the passing game. I mean, Brian Hill is their backup. I'm not even sure people know who that is. So I would expect like an 85 to 90% market share for Gio Bernard here. And because the Bears' pass rush is so good and the offensive line on Cincinnati is so bad, he might end up with like 7 dump-offs in this game too. And he's $3,100. I can't remember anything like this happening since I think it was like Carlos Williams last year. Like, generally, DraftKings has done a really good job at pricing the backups in a spot where even if they get bumped up a notch, it just so happened that this was a Monday night game, so it never happened. Like, is there a tournament contrarian strategy? If you just want to play game theory and say, you know what, I know Gio Bernard's going to be owned by like 50 to 60% of the people in the Millionaire Maker, I'm not going to take him. Is that a smart move, or is that contrarian for the sake of being stupid?
Well, I mean, there's other plays that we're going to talk about that are very much underpriced at other positions. So, I mean, eventually you're going to have to spend your salary cap somewhere. So it would be a situation like that where, let's say you play Steven Anderson or, Josh Gordon or, some other players that maybe you just think are too cheap relative to their current price point and you just have money to pay up from Gio. But, I mean, obviously he's going to be super chalk for a good reason. But there's some other running backs, too, that are, pretty cheap that have some usage available as well. So, I mean, he's obviously going to be the chalkiest player on DraftKings this week. I think we can safely say that if Joe Mixon sits. So, I wouldn't play 0.
All right, so I guess my question would be, does there become a breaking point in terms of ownership where you would fade him? Or is the move just use him? He's sort of like, I don't want to say a free square, only because we've seen better players in better positions turn up, butt kiss here in a spot like this. But where he is so cheap, do you just differentiate at the top with some of your superstar players and pivot that way and just roll with it here at $3,100?
I mean, what's the highest Gio Bernard could possibly be owned in the Millie Maker?
50%?
I mean, that's just too low. I was thinking like 70.
I think enough people will talk themselves out of it knowing that he's going to be 50 to, let's say, 60% owned.
Okay, so if he's 50 to 60% owned, then 40 to 50% of the field's dead. Great, excellent. That was fun. Now let's move on. That's a great way to start the day on Sunday if that comes out to fruition.
All right, well, let's talk about some of the other running backs that are down in that tier in case you just want to pay down at running back this week, because this is really the first week all season where you can probably get 2 running backs for potentially sub $4,000 and feel all right about them. Do you like Mike Davis? He's one of these sub $4,000 guys.
That's the guy I was going to talk about as a pivot. I don't love the spot, but I can see Seattle putting up some points on Jacksonville this week, and if they do that, I think Mike Davis has a chance at a touchdown or two. He looked really good last week. I think that price is too cheap, so like the matchup's nowhere near as good as Gio's, but the price on Mike Davis definitely is too cheap.
That's $3,700. There's two other players below that at running back that I was looking at as well, but with Davis being there and with Gio being there, knowing the volume that they're going to get, it almost doesn't make sense to move on to these other guys. But if you were just taking a shot and wanting someone who is very low owned, Andre Ellington's in a very unique position right now because of all the injuries that the Texans have. You already mentioned Steven Anderson. I like Steven Anderson as well, but as of right now, as we're recording this, it doesn't look like Bruce Ellington's out for the year now. So is CJ Fedorowicz. It doesn't look like Will Fuller is going to come back and play. Braxton Miller is still in concussion protocol. And they've already gone and signed Michael Pruitt, who spells his name Michael, which is just fantastic. And it looks like Andre Ellington might end up playing the slot role in the Texans offense. And he gets running back eligibility. He's only $3,600. Like, could he backdoor his way very easily into like 6 for 60 and anything else is upside?
Yeah, I guess I hadn't even thought of that, to be honest.
Well, he played 77% of his snaps last week out of the slot, and him and Miller will be on the field at the same time should all these injuries continue to persist. Now, if Will Fuller comes back, maybe they don't end up using him. Maybe if Braxton Miller comes back, they throw someone else on the outside and use Braxton Miller in the slot. It was really intriguing to see how the snap breakdown really shook out for him, because where he ended up playing, I think it was like 59% of the snaps overall, and 77% of his snaps came out of the slot. Like, he's going to essentially be their Danny Amendola, Julian Edelman type player here.
Yeah, but how much of that was desperation, right? Like, they were literally down to like fumes. So I agree, the spot's interesting, but it might just be the wrong week. But I certainly will give it a second look and kind of see how the injury report moves as the week moves on.
I have yet to hear anything about Amir Abdullah this week, but whenever you're dealing with a neck injury, it becomes a bit worrisome. Obviously, that makes Theo Riddick very appealing because DraftKings is full point PPR. But what about someone like Tion Green? I think that's how you say his name. Tion!
I don't think I'm going to get into that platoon. I mean, I thought Theo Chalk week last week was a little interesting because Tion Green was a preseason stud. When they activated him, I mean, he had played 0 snaps all season. It wasn't to sit on the bench. Yeah, I think it's going to be a straight platoon. Like, they just don't want Theo to be carrying the ball 15-plus times a game. So, he looked pretty good, and in a tough matchup, too, against the Ravens, I might add, averaging 4.6 yards per carry. Pretty porous run defense in Tampa. Like, I actually would kind of hope that maybe I got word that Tion Green was going to be the guy. I actually might have more interest in going the other way and playing Tion Green over Theo.
Yeah, that's sort of the situation that I would fall into, too, just because I would assume that if they do get down there that they would give Green the ball over Riddick. I know we saw Riddick score the touchdown last week, but Green, like, it's almost like when you saw Mike Davis the first time around before he had the groin injury. It's like, wow, this guy looks really good. Tion Green was kind of the same way in that game. Every time he touched the ball, it was like, this is like the best Lions running back since Barry Sanders. I mean, that's not saying much, but, like, he looks competent. This is kind of crazy. So I think that with his goal line upside, maybe we can get some revelations like we got last Sunday when all of a sudden Peyton Barber was just announced as the starter for Tampa before lock. And if you moved on to Peyton Barber, that worked out really well. I would say keep Green on your radar for something later in the week. But again, there's 2 more guys below $4,000 too that could be volume guys here as well. Like Adrian Peterson has not practiced yet. He's going to be a game time decision. I stupidly went in on DJ Foster last week, and as it turned out, Kerwin Williams was the play. Kerwin Williams is only $3,900. It's a tougher matchup against Tennessee, but he did see the majority of touches in that backfield last week, and they're not afraid to use him in the passing game, generally speaking, because when Peterson plays, he becomes sort of what DJ Foster became to Kerwin Williams last week. And the other guy right there, as sad as it sounds, like the Bills' run D sucks. Frank Gore is $3,900.
Yeah, I'm with you. I did the DJ Foster thing too. Kerwin Williams has broken ribs. Like, we shouldn't forget that. Like, even though he was effective last week, he is playing with broken ribs. I feel like if I play Kerwin Williams this week, DJ Foster is going to get all the touches I expected last week. I think I'm just going to stay away. I think I'd rather just play like a Larry Fitzgerald or Blaine Gabbert and not deal with this situation.
What about Gore?
It's Frank Gore. I'm not playing Frank Gore.
Frank
Like,
Gore's...
I would play all the other guys we just mentioned first before Frank Gore.
So you would play Kerwin and Andre Ellington over Frank Gore?
I'd play Tion Green over Frank Gore.
Well, I mean, we're really kind of talking on the fringes here because the two guys from this range that you probably just do want to play are Gio and Mike Davis, right?
I think Gio's on a tier of his own. I think Mike Davis, Tion, and these other guys are kind of all in the secondary tier.
Okay, so Gio is the play from down in that range. Now let's go all the way to the top. You have Todd Gurley up against the Eagles, $8,100. And on DraftKings, when you look, it'll tell you that, you know, the fewest fantasy points scored for opposing running backs this season has come against Philadelphia. However, there is no game script where Todd Gurley gets taken out of if he's not effective on the ground. They will simply just pass to him, and he might end up getting his 20-plus touches that way. And that's even more valuable at that point, as long as he's still getting his goal line touches with that touchdown potential. He's $8,100. Then it goes into Melvin, LaShawn McCoy, and Fournette. There are four guys that are $7,000 or more this week. Of those four, who do you like the most?
I love Todd Gurley. I think this Eagles run defense has been a product of their schedule. Like, if you look at their schedule, they've faced, like, no running backs all season. You know, like 64 yards against Washington, who's been terrible. Kansas City, they gave up 112. They're only one of their only 200-plus games of the year to Hunt when he was playing well. 49 against the Giants, awful running backs. 58 to the awful Chargers running backs. 31 to the awful Arizona running backs. 80 to Jonathan Stewart. 75 to the awful. Like, it's just, you go up and down the list. Like, even Carlos Hyde and the 49ers ran for almost 100. I really feel like this is just and Mike Davis last week ran for 100. And I think Todd Gurley is clearly the best running back they faced this season. They gave up 112 to Zeke too. Like, I'm sorry, that was the week Zeke was out, so I don't even know who the hell they gave that up to. For me, it's a situation. I'm going to go ahead and ride Todd Gurley here. I think the Eagles are overrated as a team. I know they're very good, but this is a situation where I think the Rams are going to kind of show that, like, Philly is not just the crown of the NFC, and I think the Rams put out a beat down here. So I really like Todd Gurley this week.
Yeah, I actually think this game is a high-scoring one in terms of total. I think it will probably end up going over the projected points, and it's a game I'm going to be targeting. I just need to sort of define the right pieces here. I think Gurley is a very intriguing option. I think you can make a case for Melvin Gordon as well, just with the way that Alfred Morris ran all over Washington last week. Melvin Gordon could potentially do the same, but it's LaShawn McCoy that really intrigues me. You're getting a discount off Gurley by $900. Not that you really need to save the money this week. We just talked about a bunch of players if you need the salary cap that you can just plug in. But Shady right now, $7,200. I'm not sure if Tyrod or Nate Peterman is playing, frankly. It doesn't really matter to me. Yes, Tyrod would probably be better for his upside, but Traveris Cadet is already not practicing this week. There's a chance he doesn't play. Mike Tolbert probably going to miss again this week with a hamstring injury. Enough people have been burned by Shady over and over because he's not getting all the touches that if Nate Peterman plays, it's almost, I would feel like they have to give him the ball 20 times in this matchup. And Indianapolis, while they're okay, they're about league average in DVOA against the run. They actually give up the worst. They have the 32nd ranked DVOA versus pass-catching running backs. And I could just see a lot of dump-offs to Shady here, and we know that if he can find space, he can break it. And I just don't think a lot of people are going to use him.
Yeah, I like Shady this week. I think $7,200 is a very fair price for him. I think if I was paying up twice at running back, Shady would be the guy behind Gurley. I don't have much interest in anyone else near the top other than those two. I worry every time you play the Colts about the pace of the game, but Brissett on the road and Buffalo and the cold dome team outside, I'm willing to kind of just let that go in this kind of spot.
Is that a strategy that you might deploy this week? Because we just mentioned all the running backs that you could pay down for. If you paid up at both your running back spots, do you think that itself could be a contrarian move, and then you could take your Steven Andersons or Trey Burtons or just pay down wherever?
Yeah, I think it is. I think that's like the only way I would fade Gio is to be doing something different with a lineup construction. It wouldn't be just hey, I'm gonna play Tion Green over Gio. Like, no, it's gonna be just a completely different roster construction build, and maybe the value tight ends go bonkers, and you need the raw points at running back. It'd be something like that. We haven't had a slate like that this year where like raw points has come in because there's so much value. So it might be a different build than people are kind of used to this season.
Below the $7,000 threshold, the next running back up is Christian McCaffrey, then Kareem Hunt, Carlos Hyde, Jamal Williams, Lamar Miller, Marshawn Lynch, Samaje Perine, and Alfred Morris brings us to $5,500. Do any one of those running backs intrigue you? Because I feel like we need to bring up his name every week because everyone just hates his guts now, but is there any value to Kareem Hunt at all going up against the Raiders, or is it just pure pass?
I mean, sure, there's value. I mean, I think Alex Smith was the first quarterback to ever have 4+ passing, 20-yard pass touchdown plays in the same game. So, I pretty sure that's what the stat was. I might have just said that wrong. But the big plays aren't always going to be there for Kansas City. Now, I know they've been awful against Tyreek Hill in their matchups since he's been on the Kansas City Chiefs, but I think this is the type of guy who has if you've been playing a little better recently, would be priced in the top 4, so there's value in this price, but it just feels like the wrong week. Like, there's good punts, there's good elite guys. Do I really need to be living in this tier? Like, what's the point of this tier? I don't really see it. Like, I don't mind Hunt. I don't mind Lamar Miller. We talked about Ellington having to play more slot potentially. I don't mind Morris, but it's like, are these all guys going to be that much better than Gio?
No, and that sort of thing. When I did my season-long rankings, taking price out, I had Gio Bernard for full PPR scoring ranked as my number 10 running back of the week, and he's going to be $6,000 less than or $2,500 less than guys in this range, or even $3,000. You're right, just go with Gio.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Like, you would need to have a ceiling, like a guy who you can think is going to rush for 150 and 2. As I scroll down the list, I just don't see it. By the way, if Mixon does play, he's the play in this tier. Let's be clear about that too.
But I mean,
Mixon was in a dream spot before he got concussed on Monday night.
He was. I mean, yes, but do you think he's going to play? Because I don't.
I don't, but I just wanted to mention it. If he does play, don't sleep on him.
Okay.
Because no one's going to talk about him all week. It's going to be Gio Bernard this and Gio Bernard this and Gio Bernard this. And, come Saturday, he cleared the protocol, and no one's thought about Joe Mixon all week.
One name that you mentioned, Lamar Miller, it's almost like the anti-Todd Gurley when you look at the DraftKings site, that he has the 32nd ranked team against opposing running backs. It looks like the best spot of all. But San Francisco's actually been a little bit better than against the run than maybe people think. They're sort of like Indianapolis in that way, where they give up a lot of points to pass-catching running backs, and that's where a lot of those fantasy points come from. It's not just, hey, let's give the ball 20 times to Lamar Miller down the throat, and he's going to run it all over you. They're not that bad in the interior. I mean, they're not great. They're 20th in DVOA against the run, but still, I think that number is a little bit misleading when you look at it. So I would kind of hesitate on Lamar Miller a little bit. I just prefer the Texans' passing game this week over the running game.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment, but I don't mind it. He can score 2 touchdowns here. The 49ers run, or the worst run defense in the league against just straight up the middle running backs. So I would understand it, but again, with Gio on the board, it just kind of makes you go if Gio puts up, let's say he's even puts up 15 to 16, which isn't anything special. You're looking at needing 25 from Lamar Miller. That's a pretty tall ask.
Yeah, so below the $5,500 threshold of 54, Jordan Howard, Jerick McKinnon, Mixon, like you mentioned, Latavius Murray. Then below $5,000, it's Derrick Henry, Adrian Peterson, DeMarco Murray, Aaron Jones, Duke Johnson, Theo Riddick, Peyton Barber, Jay Ajayi, and Chris Ivory, Matt Forte, Orleans Darkwa. Do any of those players interest you? If Doug Martin sits, Peyton Barber would interest me, but Doug Martin has returned to practice on a limited basis Wednesday. He obviously missed week 13, so chances are that he's going to be back. Then we're going to not know what's going on there. I mean, if it was me, I would play Peyton Barber if I was Tampa Bay and I wanted to win this game, but I mean, Doug Martin hasn't looked good outside of the first game he returned all year, but I would just expect a split situation here. The only one really that gives me some interest is Theo Riddick, potentially Duke Johnson, but like you've kind of pointed out before, if you just pay down $1,000 or pay down $1,500, you're going to find a better player.
Yeah, I would agree with that assessment for sure. I think it's not really a great spot for any of these guys. I think the guy I would actually play is Duke Johnson at 46 against Green Bay. There's a lot of chatter about this game kind of being, the game the Browns could win, the Browns could play well here. If I was going to play someone, it would be Duke Johnson and kind of hopefully this game shoots back and forth. But again, it's just the wrong week for this tier.
All right, let's move to wide receivers, if we're saving so much money at tight end and potentially paid down at quarterback and running back, maybe you can afford all the high-end receivers if you really want to. DeAndre Hopkins is one of two receivers that is above $8,000. He's $8,500. Keenan Allen is $8,300. And then the only other players above $7,000 are A.J. Green, Adam Thielen, and Tyreek Hill. Which one would you go with? Or would you go with two of these guys if you paid down at the other positions?
Yeah, so paying up at wide receiver is something that I see myself doing this week a lot. Love DeAndre Hopkins. This is a really good spot. Had a lot of targets last week, a lot of catches, a lot of yards, just didn't find the end zone. Don't mind him. Adam Thielen, I think, is the guy that's going to be sneaky in this spot. Diggs on Bradbury this week. Thielen's going to have kind of some free reign in the slot. And again, like that game last week against the Falcons was just kind of weird. I'm willing to cross it out. Simply the Vikings knew that Atlanta couldn't move the ball against them and played pretty conservatively. Don't think they're going to have that option this week against Cam Newton and a little more mobile quarterback here that should be able to get some points on the board. So I think Thielen will go back to his 8 catch for 75 type games he's been putting up all season. And I think with Tyreek Hill below him, who I do like, no one's going to play Thielen.
You think that Hill, is it because Hill's coming off the gigantic game that won people lots of money and Thielen busted out at high ownership? Do you think that's why? Or people just look at the matchup and be like, oh, Kansas City plays Oakland, I'll play the Kansas City guys?
Yeah, especially when you know that Tyreek Hill has had 5 touchdowns against Oakland in 3 games. So it's just a situation where I think last week's narrative, plus like looking at the history versus Oakland, and I think Tyreek Hill's going to be a spot a lot of people go. But there's some good pivots right around him. Mentioned Thielen. And then Marvin Jones, if Stafford plays, is an amazing pivot.
Well, we'll talk about the Lions guys in a second, but I did want to scroll back up and talk about Keenan Allen and A.J. Green for a second. Is Keenan Allen essentially an object at rest? He cannot be stopped?
I worry about this spot a little bit. The Redskins play a bunch of zone. And like Keenan Allen's been mashing these man defenses. Now he did well against the Buffalo zone, but Buffalo just has no talent. I'm a little concerned on Keenan Allen this week. I wouldn't say like I'm super concerned, but I mean I don't think he can keep up an 11 catch per week pace. That's just insane.
All right, so let's talk about these Lions receivers. Marvin Jones is $6,900 and Golden Tate is $6,400. The big question mark is going to be Matthew Stafford's hand. According to Jim Caldwell on Wednesday, that he's not out of the woods yet, so there's a chance he misses this game, and then we're really dealing with some problems. But let's say he's banged up all week. People are going to avoid that situation the best they can. This is still a primo matchup against the Bucs, and if the Bucs can muster up any sort of offense, which they should be able to do against the Lions, then it's going to keep Detroit throwing a lot of the time. If Stafford plays, even if he's not 100%, would you pivot onto Marvin Jones and or Golden Tate?
Yes, I'd pivot onto Marvin Jones. I love this spot for him. He's been mashing all season, and then he had a tough matchup against Jason McCourty on the Browns, and then he hasn't had like a great matchup since his last 4 matchups just in a vacuum. Baltimore, Minnesota, Chicago, and Cleveland, those are some pretty good pass defenses, and the fact that he's even put up respectable lines in 3 of those 4, and now he gets a cupcake matchup, I think we're going to see more like what we saw against Pittsburgh or Green Bay, where he puts up 11 or 12 targets, and over 100 receiving yards. I just love Marvin Jones this week.
What if Matthew Stafford is forced to sit in this game and then we get Jake Rudick?
Oh. I probably can't. Rudock was so bad in college. How's he on a roster?
Yeah, well, he might be starting in the NFL because anyone can start in the NFL if your name's not Colin Kaepernick, apparently.
I think I would still play some Marvin Jones just because of the matchup. It's just too good of a matchup to fade a talent like this.
But
I would know that it's nowhere near as good a play as it is with Stafford's in.
Sure, but let's say Stafford's not going to be 100% because it doesn't look like he's going to be 100%, and he might not have the same grip that he did in the past. Do you think that would lean more towards a short route Golden Tate game? Because I think if Rudick ends up starting, then Golden Tate might actually be a play.
I think I'm just taking Marvin Jones no matter what here.
Nope.
Like, he's just been a freak. And Golden Tate just has no touchdown equity. Like, as much as I keep wanting him to score touchdowns, like, they just never look his way in the red zone. So, like, it's just tough to, play him. I think I would just take – if I'm going to play a Detroit receiver – in any scenario, I'm just going to gamble with the upside on Marvin Jones when the gap is $400.
All right, so the other guys in the $6,000 range, right above Marvin Jones, is Mike Evans, who everyone hates now because he doesn't know how to catch and had no catches in the first half against Green Bay last week. Then it's Marv, then Crabtree, Devontae Adams, Larry Fitzgerald, Robbie Anderson, Golden Tate, Alshon Jeffrey, Cooper Kupp, again without Robert Woods, it looks like, Devin Funches, and then, again, Robert Woods is $6,000, but he's probably not going to play with that shoulder injury. I love Larry Fitzgerald here, and you can make cases for the other guys around him. Hey, Robbie Anderson just lights up everyone. That's fine. Devontae Adams is Brett Hundley's number one guy, so one more week, although he might draw McCourty in this matchup. Michael Crabtree, great matchup, especially, hey, Jason Peters might not end up playing, but, like, it's going to be hard to talk me off of Larry Fitzgerald in this spot.
Marcus Peters got suspended, I'm pretty sure.
He did get suspended. Okay, so there's no Marcus Peters then.
I'm pretty sure he got suspended by the Chiefs. Like, they suspended him.
Oh, they suspended him. Okay, I didn't.
I can pull it up real quick, I guess.
Well, you pull that. But anyway, let's just say he's out. Crabtree or Larry Fitzgerald? I think it's Larry Fitzgerald.
Yeah, it's still Larry Fitzgerald for me, and he is suspended. For me, it is definitely Larry Fitzgerald. Tennessee's pass defense is awful. Blaine Gabbert loves throwing the ball to Fitz. Fitz is reasonably priced. Arizona's on the turf at home. I love Fitz. I have no objections to Fitz. He's probably my favorite guy in the tier. I would not play Devontae Adams against Jason McCourty. That is not going to go well, which could open up a value wide receiver as we scroll on down here a little bit. But in the next tier, we have to talk about the chalkiest of chalk.
Yes, the chalkiest player of Week 14, not named Gio Bernard, because I think that Gio's ownership will eclipse his, but Josh Gordon is $5,500, 11 targets last week in his first game back in 2 years. In an awful matchup against Casey Hayward, and the Chargers ends up putting up 80-plus points for 80-plus yards, 4 catches. Now he walks into a gravy matchup against the Packers, and everyone is all over Josh Gordon's jock. I think if I had to fade one between Gordon and Gio, I would fade Gordon, but I don't think I'd feel great about doing it.
I don't see a way to fade Josh Gordon in this spot. I mean, 11 targets against Casey Hayward, and now he's going to play against an awful Green Bay secondary. Like, I just think the targets are going to be there in droves. I don't really see myself fading Josh Gordon this week. I don't. I think he's about 2,000 too cheap. I think he should be in the top 5. He's not. I'm just going to go ahead and lock this spot in, I think. I just don't. Now, there are some nice pivots in this tier, but, I mean, I'd rather probably make it an and situation and pay up at running back first, I think, than fade Josh Gordon again. Like, it's just, I could just see 8 catches for 150 and 2 really easily. He's so freakishly good, and Green Bay's secondary is so bad.
Okay, so let me, almost like I got you to do for Gio Bernard and make the case against him, and you said, hey, Gio Bernard's had a lot of injuries in the past. I can make a case against Josh Gordon. His name, your buddy, DeShone Kizer.
Yeah, but DeShone Kizer can throw
Sucks. I know, you're right.
But he can throw a deep ball.
Can he? Because he overthrew Josh Gordon for a clear touchdown last week.
Yeah? I mean, did you know that you could overthrow Josh Gordon? That's pretty hard to do.
I guess maybe he knows that now. Is there any merit to saying, you know what, last week, the 11 targets, it was his first game back, they're trying to get Josh Gordon involved. Green Bay knows that all they're going to do is throw to Josh Gordon. Is there any interest in Corey Coleman whatsoever, considering he was averaging like 8 targets a game before Josh Gordon came back?
No, because Cleveland has to win a game. Like, if they had won a game, maybe, but, like, they're going to get their best player of the ball in this spot because they need to win a game. Now, if you told me you wanted to pivot to Doug Baldwin, I could at least, I would entertain the idea of it. Like, man, he was an inch away from a touchdown, and I actually still don't know how that was overturned last week. I think that this is an interesting spot. Like, Jacksonville's outside corners are good. Their slot, not so much. And if Seattle, obviously, we know they have no running game. I mean, Mike Davis has been an improvement, but it's still, their offensive line is pretty porous, and Jacksonville's a great defensive line. They're going to have to throw a lot here, and shorter patterns to Baldwin could be part of the solution. And this was the cheapest price. I mean, Doug Baldwin's probably been in years. Well, so if you wanted to make that ballsy pivot, I get it. Sterling Shepard, probably too cheap as well. But Aguilar with no Ertz, I get it. Goodwin, like there's a lot of good options here, but Josh Gordon is just clearly better player than all those guys.
I mean, Doug Baldwin is very good. Talent-wise, Josh Gordon probably is better. I like the situation for Doug Baldwin a little bit more with the guy throwing him the ball. Obviously, the matchup is terrible, but the one thing that really concerns me about Doug Baldwin is we saw Jacksonville against Arizona. Jalen Ramsey just moved into the slot and covered Larry Fitzgerald. I just assume that's what's going to happen this week. Put Jalen Ramsey on your best guy and shut him down and make P. Rich or Tyler Lockett beat you.
I think that Arizona situation was kind of an outlier because they were without John Brown. They literally had no one outside, like literally no one. I'm not so sure that he's going to do that again. And against Paul Richardson and Lockett, who are pretty, like, they're decent receivers. I mean, he could, but I don't see that happening.
Do you think that Doug Baldwin in the Millionaire Maker is under 2% owned?
Under.
It might be worth taking a shot in case he doesn't line up against Ramsey and ends up with one of those Doug Baldwin-esque 9 for 127 and 2 touchdown games.
As you mentioned, that we normally get that thing, but where Ramsey's going to be before lock, that thing normally typically leaks. So we should have an answer one way or another before lock.
Yeah, I mean, let's say we find out that Ramsey is going to be on Baldwin. Would any of Lockett or Richardson interest you?
Probably not. I would probably just rather play like Sterling Shepard against the poorest Dallas defense, 5,300. He was chalk against the 49ers a couple weeks ago with Eli Manning at quarterback, and Eli's back. I could see him being a really low-owned guy with a high target floor. Aguilar, a 2 with no Ertz is pretty interesting. So this tier is pretty strong. Like if Josh Gordon were 6,700, I could make a case for a fade just to be like, hey, you know, this 5K tier is so strong, but like just one-on-one, like Josh Gordon is just better than any one of these other plays.
Well, I like Marquise Goodwin at $5,100. I like the matchup going up against Houston when typically, if you're not the Chicago Bears and you play the 49ers, you tend to run a lot of plays. They give up the most plays against of any team. I think Chicago is only able to muster like 37 plays against them, which seems insane. But then when you kind of flip it around, you know that the Texans are probably going to be chucking the ball a lot of incompletions from Tom Savage as well. So if we're talking about just pure volume, I mean, I don't think that Marquise Goodwin's going to end every Jimmy Garoppolo game with a 100% catch rate, but it seems like he is the guy that they're looking for. They're using him on short routes now. We know about his speed. We know he can get behind a defense. The matchup is rather soft against the Texans. I think if I was going to pivot off of Gordon onto any one of these guys, I would pivot down to Marquise Goodwin, or God forbid, pivot up to Sammy Watkins against the Eagles.
Please do not pivot up to Sammy Watkins. Don't do it.
He's one big play away here. And
He's been one big play away since week 1. How's that working out for you?
Hey, the fact that he scored a touchdown last week just blew my mind, and I think he can do it against Philadelphia.
I think that's really reaching.
Hey, I think he scored a touchdown every game that Robert Woods has missed.
Okay, but Josh Gordon is really, really good at football, and he's 100 less. I just don't see playing Watkins over Gordon. Goodwin, I like San Francisco. I'll save the hot take for quarterback, though.
But that you love Tom Savage?
I'll save it for the quarterback section. You got to keep watching the show if you want to know what it is.
All right, good tease. This is why you're the pro here, not me. $4,000 level. Anyone there pique your fancy?
D.D. Westbrook is still a freak at 4,200. Like if it wasn't for Josh Gordon, I would be right back to D.D. Westbrook. Like his targets are through the roof. 9, 10, and 6 catches each of the last 2. Hasn't hit the end zone yet, but I think that changes this week. He's gotten tackled inside the 10 a couple times, and then Fournette just trolled the touchdowns. I think Westbrook gets in the end zone this week.
You know, Westbrook actually had more DK points than Josh Gordon last week. I think people forget that.
Yeah, but I mean, Josh Gordon last week also had an impossible matchup. And then Jordy Nelson at 4,500. We talked about Devontae Adams looking like he's going to draw the lockdown coverage here. I think this is the week for that Jordy Nelson puts up a solid game here, and I think no one's going to play him because I think people tried it against Tampa and it went absolutely wrong. But I think if Green Bay is going to have to score some points and Cleveland's just so good against the run, I think Jordy Nelson here is going to be in a prime spot to rebound. Him and Randall Cobb, I think, are flyers that you could play.
Yeah, I'm not. If you're not going to go up to Sammy Watkins, I'm not touching Jordy Nelson until Aaron Rodgers gets back. Just can't do it. Like even before with Aaron Rodgers, he was still kind of touchdown dependent as it was, but he was just getting them every single week. It was something you can almost pencil in. With Brett Hundley, just no thanks. Like I haven't seen anything that would lean me towards Jordy Nelson whatsoever.
Devontae Adams is not going to be a viable target this week. That's
yeah,
that's
but Brett Hundley is so not good. He might just throw it his way anyway because that's his only look.
Brett Hundley was the guy who just went toe to toe with the Steelers. Like we can't. This isn't just a 1 week.
He didn't play toe to toe with the Steelers. There was a screen pass that went for like 60 yards, and then no one was around Randall Cobb. It was like 2 plays.
Yeah, but the Cleveland defense still not good.
I'm not banking on broken coverage.
If you were going to bank on broken coverage for any team, wouldn't the Browns be right there at the top of your list?
No, their defense isn't all that bad.
It's the run defense is good. Their pass defense is very porous. I certainly am. I think those guys are worth flyers if you're punting down there. I think those are the best of the options.
What is there anyone in the $3,000 tier that you don't mind at all? Because I don't mind. I mean, I don't mind Josh Reynolds. I think I'd actually rather pay the price for Josh Reynolds and pay for Sammy Watkins, to be perfectly honest with you. And then the other guy down there is Trent Taylor, who he's probably more of a, I don't even really want to say a cash guy because he's safe, but in that offense with Garoppolo, like he's the Julian Edelman of that offense. He's just going to run 8-yard routes, stand there, and have really high percentage passes. 6 targets last week. I could see him improving upon that, and he's not bad after the catch either.
Yeah, I don't mind him, but I think he'd be more of a play I would play in a game stack than like just a guy who would be like, oh, hey, let's play Jimmy G and Trent Taylor and no one else. I don't see that kind of thing happening.
Sure. Is there anyone like down at the bare min or anything like that you like?
I didn't notice anyone my first through.
Yeah.
Keaton Cole, I guess, but he's 3,500. I don't think there's really any min price guys that you really need to be considering this week. And with all the value, I don't think you need to be this desperate.
Yeah. I think you're right on that. And we don't know the status of Alan Hearns. He's probably not going to play. And if he does play, then Keelan Cole's basically useless. I did want to make the note about Sterling Shepard that he missed Wednesday's practice with a hamstring injury. He's had the migraines. Now he has a pop-up hamstring injury. So I would monitor his status as the week goes on, just in case all of a sudden, hey, Evan Ingram's all of a sudden in the best spot possible and everyone else is paying down at tight end. That might be a nice contrarian move. We'll talk about more with that when we get to tight ends, but for now we're on quarterbacks. And what's your quarterback hot take? Please tell me.
I think Garoppolo is the best play of the week. I really do. 5,500 last week. He looked good moving the ball down the field. He threw the ball 37 times. They just couldn't score a touchdown in the red zone. They were 0 for 5. They kicked 5 field goals. Those types of things balance out here. And against the bad Texans defense, I think, let's say they only have a 60% touchdown spot this week. Like, that's 3 touchdowns, and I think Jimmy G is good for at least 2 of them. I love the Jimmy G spot. He's going to be my highest owned quarterback this week. I don't see how Houston can stop him. Their defense is done, and that team is kind of taken this season. I love Jimmy G this week.
So are you stacking with Jimmy G? So Jimmy G and Goodwin? Are you going with the running back with Carlos Hyde, assuming they pass to him a lot? Or is this just a Jimmy G, use DeAndre Hopkins on the other side, use Steven Anderson, and kind of be done with it?
You can do all sorts of things, Pat. You can go with Goodwin and Taylor, and you can totally game stack it with Hopkins and Anderson. You can kind of just go with Goodwin and Anderson. You can go there's a lot of different combinations here that you can use with Jimmy G. I just we saw the floor, which was no touchdowns when he threw for just under 300 and just missed the bonus. Like, if he hits the 300-yard bonus and has a touchdown, that's another 9 points, and then he'd be pretty popular this week. So I think that just the way the DK scoring worked last week, just kind of he hit his absolute floor for how well he played. So yeah, I think I'm going to go ahead and just roll Jimmy G here.
Is this a week to pay down at quarterback, do you think? Because there are 3 other options that I like Jimmy G just like you do, but there are 3 other options that I'm kind of intrigued by, and you let me know which one you like the best. I have a feeling I know which one you like the best, but I'll still list them out anyway in the order that I like them. Blaine Gabbert, 4,800. Tom Savage, 4,800. Deshaun Kaiser, 4,900. Those 3 guys I think are usable.
My issue with Gabbert is why wouldn't I just play Larry Fitz? Like, it's not like Blaine Gabbert has this massive rushing upside.
He does run the ball. He does run the ball, though. It's weird.
But like, he hasn't done anything. It's like not even 20 yards rushing in any game. Like, you feel like he keeps doing more than that, but he hasn't. I think I would just rather play Larry Fitzgerald, and I get so much of that offense anyways. I don't have to use the quarterback spot on him as well. So I think he'd be my least favorite of the three.
Okay.
And then Kaiser and who?
Savage. Like, if we all like...
I'm not playing Savage.
If we all like DeAndre Hopkins and we all like Steven Anderson, there is a common denominator.
Those are all PPR plays. They're going to get so many points through PPR. Like, quarterbacks, you need the touchdowns. Like, wide receivers can do well without their quarterbacks doing well if they get a bunch of receptions. And that's kind of how the Houston offense rolls. So definitely no on Savage.
Here's the one thing, though. San Francisco's defense, much worse against the pass than they are against the run, despite the fantasy points allowed to position. They're actually 30th DVOA against the pass. They're the team that allows the most plays against them. I can just see Savage dropping back 40 times in this game. If you get 40 pass attempts against the Niners and you have Hopkins, you have Anderson, you're using Andre Ellington in the passing game, like, there could be enough here. He threw for like 360 last week.
But he's not the guy who's going to give you 3 touchdowns, Pat. He's not.
He might be that. I mean, Lamar Miller is not, the greatest goal line dynamo in the biz.
I can't believe I'm the one that's attacking Tom Savage. I've been like on the Tom Savage's mediocre train all season, but you just can't. There's not enough touchdown upside. Like, with so few options on the Houston Texans passing game, they're going to get there in receptions. They don't have to get there in touchdowns. I wouldn't take the risk on Savage. I think Kaiser's interesting because we've seen his rushing. Like, this is a guy that actually does rush. Like, 46, 39 and a touchdown, 22, 57 and a touchdown, 18 and a touchdown. Like, he's kind of like their sneaky goal line back. He's got 5 rushing touchdowns on the season.
Yeah, he's like the poor man's Josh McCown when it comes to rushing.
I think he's the play I would play if I was going this far down. And with the amount of Josh Gordon I have, I guess I'm going to have to play some, but I don't feel very good about it.
All right.
I think he's going to be higher owned than I personally am comfortable with, but just with the amount of Josh Gordon I'm going to have, I probably can't have 0.
I guess the big takeaway here, it's probably not necessary to go scumming down this low if Jimmy G is $5,500 and he is the superior play. I do like Savage, for the record, though. If we go to the top and you want to pay up at quarterback, because you can basically pay up at any position you want this week because there's enough value at each of the other positions that's how you can kind of formulate a different type of build. Use some of the chalkier guys and still be contrarian in a way. At the very top, Wentz is 71, the only quarterback above $7,000. Then it's Rivers, Goff, Alex Smith, Derek Carr, Stafford, Cam Newton, Russell Wilson, Case Keenum, and then Josh McCown. I think there's a lot of interesting contrarian plays for high upside players here. Like, I don't think a lot of people are going to use Cam Newton. I don't think a lot of people are going to use Russell Wilson. Now, when you look at the matchups, I understand why they're not going to be popular. But one name I don't think that people are going to go to is Josh McCown at $6,000 because they say, oh, Denver's defense. Denver's defense is really good. Talib's going to be back. Denver's defense is not really good anymore. They've just been sieves for like the past 6 weeks. And Josh McCown has been Mr. I'll win you every fantasy week going. And he's only $6,000.
Yeah, this is the first take I really disagree with you on. I actually think the Denver defense is a very sneaky tournament play. This is the classic Jets do Jets things spot. Just when you think you can trust the Jets, McCown throws 3 interceptions, 2 pick sixes in the altitude, and the Denver defense rises up, and you're just like, what the hell just happened? I just can't play Josh McCown this week. That's a non-starter for me. I agree with the other names on the list, though. I think Russell Wilson, sneaky. We talked about that. I think he makes for a nice stack with Baldwin. I think Cam Newton has the rushing upside as well. I think he's sneaky. I think quarterback is not that strong of a position this week. Like, there's no Brady. There's Russell Wilson's in a tough matchup. There's no Big Ben. There's no Drew Brees. There's no Matt Ryan. Quarterback, like, your standards should be lowered this week at quarterback, I think. Now, I think Alex Smith is going to be insanely popular this week. Insanely popular at 6,500, given how bad the Raiders secondary is and what they just did last week. I think he could approach 30% owned this week. I really do. And I don't play quarterbacks that get that high. I just can't. So, I think Alex Smith is clearly the chalk option up here. And looking at the other options, it's clear to see why. But
I guess
just don't know.
I mean, maybe McCown will be popular, and I just am not seeing that just based off how many good weeks in a row that he's had. What about the two guys right below him, Jameis and Mariota? I can see Jameis more than Mariota.
Been awful. Mariota's been awful. I just can't do that. Winston, again, like, it's a tough spot, right? Evans is going to draw sleigh coverage, so I mean, we know Winston doesn't start throwing when Evans has a tough matchup. He will not throw him the football, like, at all. Just will not do it. So I think I would rather just attack like Deshaun or Brady as a one-off before I use Jameis. So I really think my quarterbacks this week are going to be very narrow. I don't like a whole lot here. You know, I think if you find the guy who goes for 350 and 3, that's going to be worth more than it is, say, on a normal week, because I just don't see a ton of quarterbacks doing that this week.
Well, I guess the last two guys to consider, and I talked about how I think that game could very well be a shootout, and it's Eagles-Rams. Goff or Wentz?
Yeah, I think you like that game more than I do. I don't think the Eagles are good. I think that the Rams are going to kind of control this game early in offense. So for me, it's not really a situation I'm targeting. But again, if you believe that game is going to shoot out, I certainly would attack those quarterbacks.
Tight ends, the two pay-down tight ends right now as it stands with all the injuries in Houston, Steven Anderson at $3,200 makes a whole lot of sense. Zach Ertz still has not passed concussion protocol. It doesn't look like he's going to play either, which would mean we got Trey Burton at $2,900. Outside of those two guys, we're going to be super chalky. Mind you, is there any other pay-down tight end that you like?
There's two, actually.
Okay.
So if you just talked about your love for Josh McCown, I assume that means you're in on Austin Seferian-Jenkins when we know that Denver can't cover the middle of the field.
I am, actually. I think this is actually a nice rebound spot after everyone has given up all hope on ASJ.
Yeah, I understand that. And then I just mentioned Evans is going to draw Darius Slate coverage, and we know when he doesn't throw to Mike Evans in the red zone, he throws to Cameron Brate, and we can make America Brate again. I like Brate again at this spot.
I like Brate as well, but he's $4,100. Like, I was thinking about, like, the really bottom of the barrel, save you all of the money guys. But yeah, I'm in on Brate. Even when Evans is not shut down, when they get in the red zone, I actually feel like Brate is his first look over Evans regardless.
Yeah, it really is. So I like that spot too. But we can talk about the top. I mean, it's a pretty short conversation though.
Well, I mean, Kelsey is in the spot of spots. He's $7,400. Although I think if Sterling Shepard doesn't play, Dallas also sucks against tight ends. And if he's going to be the only guy in that offense doing anything, a $6,000 Evan Ingram I find very intriguing.
Agreed. I think it's very appealing. And then, we know Jacksonville's got good outside corners. Jimmy Graham over the middle. He gets a ton of red zone looks. That's the other guy. And then that's it for me.
Yeah, me too, when it comes down to it. My problem with Jimmy Graham is the last two games, only 3 catches in each. I know he's catching the touchdowns every week, and it's just saving him. Maybe you just bank on the touchdowns. They always keep coming because that is their play inside the red zone. But if Mike Davis, if there's a place to attack Jacksonville, it's either with the tight end up the middle or it's through the running game, which teams have been able to do. That if Jacksonville just schemes away Jimmy Graham, it could allow Doug Baldwin, who is actually quite good inside the red zone himself, or Mike Davis. I think it's a decent week to fade Jimmy Graham.
I think the ownership is going to be too low on a guy who's caught 5 touchdowns in his last 5. Last 4.
But do you think it's going to be that low? Because he's a nice midway point. Like, I even look at it, I think, hey, the Bills suck. Brissett didn't really throw to Jack Doyle at all last week because he had no time to throw to anyone. But in games where he's not significantly under pressure, Jack Doyle tends to go like 7 for 70 or 9 for 95. Like, Jack Doyle's not a terrible play here either.
I think if your name is not Travis Kelce or Steven Anderson or Trey Burton, you're going to be contrarian. I just think all the ownership's going to either go super punt or the guy who's in a super awesome spot. I can see a lot of people playing both, being like, oh, I want to fit in Travis Kelce. I only have, 10.6K left in cap. I know, I'll play one of the cheap tight ends and then play Kelce with them. I think those ownership is just going to be through the roof.
All right, so the two contrarian plays then, if you wanted to pivot off of all that high ownership, at the high end would be Evan Ingram. At the mid-tier, it would be Cameron Brate. At the low end, it would be Austin Seferian-Jenkins.
I'm including Graham in that list. I know you don't like him, but I certainly am not passing up on that kind of touchdown equity at low ownership.
Okay, let's move to defenses to close this out. The Green Bay Packers are the highest priced defense of the week at $3,700. We're going to take a pass on that one. That goes Chargers, Colts, Jags, Broncos, Bengals, Jets, Texans, Titans, Bills, Seahawks. Where is your lean for this? Because I think I like the Chargers the best at 3,600.
I think they're fine. I like the Chargers, but I think that like you just immediately dismissing a defense facing Deshaun Kaiser and the Cleveland Browns, I think is a mistake. I like the offense, but like it's Deshaun Kaiser and the Cleveland Browns. They find all sorts of ways to give you defensive touchdowns. And everyone's going to have your opinion on that too. The Browns are +3, and everyone's like, oh, this is the spot. The Browns could win. The Browns are 0-12. And they're very, very good at giving the defense DSTs points. If you tell me, like, the Packers are going to be, like, 5% in tournaments, I can't have none.
I'm okay with having none. I think the Chargers are objectively a better play. And I think that people might pass up on the Jags this week, which I think would be foolish. I think if there's a week to play a team against a bad O-line, the Jags defense is really where you want to go. Not to say that Russell Wilson can't have a good week along with it, but Russell Wilson takes his sacks. Russell Wilson's not afraid to turn the ball over. It just takes a few sacks and something to go the other way, and boom, they're going to be passing the ball a ton.
Yeah, I also like the Bills against the Colts. Like, talk about a team that gives up tons of sacks here. Dome team moving outside. I know the Buffalo defense has been terrible lately, but if there was ever a rebound spot, this is it.
The only other two that I'm looking at, one is $2,500. I know I say I like the over to hit in that Rams and Eagles game. However, the one thing that the Eagles have not really been able to do all that well, and this is how I ended up on the Chicago Bears against them 2 weeks ago. Big mistake, but they were generating a ton of pressure in that game. The Rams are going to generate pressure, and without Jason Peters, like, you can get through that offensive line pass-wise. They're still very effective running the ball, and Carson Wentz is super slippery. The guy's covered in butter the entire time. He gets away from everything, but eventually that's going to have to stop. And one of the main reasons that it wasn't able to work out with the Bears is the Bears' offense just kept going 3 and out. Just the defense was always on the field, and eventually Philly got to them. But if Carson Wentz is going to pass like 35 to 40 times against the Rams, I think the Rams' defense can take him down and force him into mistakes, and that's a super cheap defense.
Yeah, I mean, I've been the one saying I like the Rams to win that football game convincingly all day, and the Rams are definitely going to fit in as part of that scheme as well. I also don't mind Kansas City's defense at 2,400 against the Raiders. Like, their offense is pretty depleted here, and if you decide you want to fade the Kansas City offense, like the way this works is the Raiders are just awful, and Kansas City just starts playing ball control, up 14-0, and Andy Reid starts getting conservative, turns into conservative Andy. And they start running the ball and running screens, and next thing you know, a couple sacks later, the game's low scoring, and you got the Kansas City defense has got you 12 or 13 points.
The Bears defense scored well last week because of the Tariq Cohen touchdown, and the sacks haven't really materialized for how good their pass rush has been. But I think this is a decent spot against the Bengals, who have a bottom 10 offensive line per adjusted DVOA. The Bears still inside the top 10 in adjusted sack rate for their defensive line, and it's just one that no one's going to look at. Plus, you have the added benefit that they do have a really good special teams unit, and Tariq Cohen, if they decide to punt to him, could return it for a touchdown.
I don't think I'm going to get that cute, but I understand it.
I prefer the Rams in that spot, but I do like the Bears as well for a 1% owned defense.
I don't mind the Bengals at 3,300 against the Bears. It's Trubisky on the road against a good D, and they don't have a good pass rush either.
Yeah, but the problem with, and I've kind of went back and looked at this over the past few weeks, the problem with taking defenses against the Bears is they just don't run any plays. Like, even when they're supposed to pass, they don't pass, and they just run the ball.
You're right. I would rather some of these other defenses first, but we're on defense 8 or 9 that we're talking about.
Yeah.
So
just throwing out some options here. The only other one I would either give consideration to or think about would be, Minnesota's D I find kind of intriguing because Cam could just have a bad Cam game. He does take a lot of sacks regardless, and Minnesota's defense is really good. The other one would just be the Lions because Jameis is a turnover factory.
Yeah, I mentioned Denver earlier, and I should mention them again here. This is the classic Jets do Jets things, and they lose this game 35-0.
It's still
flying in the altitude. I could just see this one blowing up right in the Jets' face. They're like, oh, we've got a shot at the playoffs. Everything's going great. Next thing you know, the Jets no-show, and everyone's like, what the?
Well, the Jets still do have a bottom 10 offensive line per adjusted sack rate, and Denver is still – where are you at, Denver? Denver is 9th in adjusted sack rate, but they've been dropping every single week. Their pass rush is not as good right now as it was at the beginning of the year.
Also, I mean, like I know they put up like they actually like I think that there's been something else going on in that locker room. Like I think that there's been an illness running through there. I mean, I've heard it from a couple places now. So I'm willing to give them a pass for a couple road games. You know, I just at home in this spot. Like if they're ever going to show up one more time this season, this is it.
Oh, I highly disagree. They're showing up next week, and they're like the D to play next week.
Who are they playing next week?
Indy.
Is it in Denver?
Where is it? I think it's in Indianapolis.
It's okay, I guess. But I think they're going to show up against the Jets this week. Just you know how there's always the spot that you want to play next week. So like I was like, oh, Kansas City offense against the Raiders next week's gonna be great, and then they go score like 4 touchdowns, and now like they're the super chalk. Anytime that you want to play a spot next week, make sure you snag a little thing of that this week so you don't lose your spot.
All right, well, maybe
I'm telling you, Denver D. I'm telling you, I like this one.
All right, well, I'm gonna have to use a few shares of Denver's D now because I do love them next week. So yeah, I'll try to be a week early on that one.
You know, it's just, man, Kansas City offense last week. I never would have saw that coming. No.
All right, L Siege, thanks for being on the line, dude.
Yeah, you bet, Pat. Anytime.
All right, tell everyone where they can read and listen to your work over at Roto Grinders.
Yeah, you can download the Morning Grind podcast on iTunes, and I'm over at rotogrinders.com. I've got tournament tactics packages. I do Roto Grinders live shows, so check it all out.
All right. I'm Pat Mayo. You can follow me at the PME on Twitter. Also, you can subscribe to the Pat Mayo Experience audio versions on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and Audio Boom video version up on the DraftKings YouTube page. Don't be afraid now to tune in Thursday night and Sunday morning one at 5 p.m., one at 11 a.m. to the DraftKings Facebook page for matchups breakdown, all the latest news for Week 14 on the DraftKings slate. I'm Pat Mayo. Good luck in Week 14. I'll see you next time.